From the opposition side. So our topic is sex tourism is a morally legitimate source of sustainable income. Or basically, sex tourism is an amoral source of income. The definition of terms. Sex tourism is defined as consisting of people from economically developed nations traveling to underdeveloped countries, specifically to purchase the sexual services of local men, women, and children. And amoral. The meaning of amoral is having no concern about whether the behavior is morally right or wrong. So having no concern, it's at the middle. One reason often given as to why prostitution or sex tourism is immoral is that it tends to involve coercion or force. So in most cases, people don't freely decide to become prostitutes. And in some cases, they're driven to the profession by desperation and a lack of opportunities for employment. Some people freely choose to be prostitutes. In these cases, the coercion argument fails. Of course, if we accept this sort of view, then it would entail that almost all jobs are immoral. After all, everyone is not the top of power, and economic hierarchy will be coerced into working by those above them. It seems reasonable, but also shows that certain types of prostitution are just as moral or immoral as most other jobs. So a prostitute who is no more forced than a professor is thus morally on par with this regard. So it's just, if we accept that coercion is morally acceptable, which is a common view in capitalism, then freely chosen prostitution would be morally acceptable on these grounds. The second main moral concern about prostitution is that it's exploitative. The exploitation of prostitutes by their pimps is because he takes far too much. Now, if a degree of exploitation is acceptable, then prostitution that involves exploitation in this range would also be acceptable. For example, working for a generous pimp or madam would be morally acceptable job because he's giving fair compensation. A third reason that prostitution is regarded as immoral is that it's supposed to be degrading to the prostitute. To treat someone as a mere sexual object is to fail to respect their worth as a human being. For example, cleaning people's toilets or working as a servant can also be regarded as degrading. Working in a sweatshop is also degrading. In fact, a case would be made that most employment involves attack on human dignity. Of course, the degree of degradation varies widely. But if some degradation is morally acceptable, then prostitution that falls within that range would also be acceptable. It has been claimed that there are historical precedents for prostitution as a profession that's not degrading. One example is that of the dancers in medieval Japan, like the geishas. Perhaps the most famous example is that of the hetera of ancient Greece. And according to Newsweek reports from the women who worked for DC Madam, they treated the woman well, and the women themselves certainly seemed to believe that they were not being degraded. So it really depends on your point of view. Because Thailand is the number one area in the world with the highest rate of sex tourism. The Thai government in particular saw tourism as a way to earn foreign exchange.
Okay, so for us, sex tourism is neither moral or immoral because it is the choice of the person if they want to have sex or not. And some of them are doing it for the sake of their families. It's their job, and you cannot blame them for doing it because that's the only way they can feed their family. For some people, it is considered as immoral because they see women as sexual objects, which is not good as well. And for some, it is moral because they're just doing it for the sake of their lives and they're thinking that maybe one day they can get a shot and have a better life rather than being a sex slave. So, hindi nga moral or immoral yung sex. Ay pagiging sex slave or prostitute. Kasi yung iba, pinipili talaga nila dahil gusto nilang makatulong or pleasures, parang gusto talaga nila sa sarili nila. Kasi may mga taong pinipili talaga yun, may mga hindi naman. Tapos, hindi naman siya sa sinabi ni Arya, adultery nga naman ang prostitution. Pero, ang side naman nila is, kung hindi nila gagawin yun, paano sila mabubuhay? Kaya hindi naman nila din choice na gawin yun, pero yun lang yung only way nila. Tapos, hindi mo naman din maging sabihin child labor. Kasi yung iba nga sa kanila, gusto naman talaga na maging prostitute. I mean, okay lang sa kanila na maging prostitute sila. Kahit yung ibang tao na ibang tao tingin sa kanila masama, parang pangit na image nila. Wala naman silang pangit. Gusto lang nila yun, parang sa sarili nila, at saka makatulong sa ibang tao. Ang prostitution, hindi nakakatulong din siya sa tourism dahil yung sa Thailand, nag-increase yung mga tourists na nag-visit dahil yung purpose ng iba is to have sex nga. For some people, masama sa paningin nila ang prostitution. Pero for some, naging culture na din siya. Like sa Thailand, yung mga prostitute doon, hindi naman sila napilitan lang. Pero matagal na yun, matagal na siya nangyayari. Pero nakasanayan na naging culture na nila na may prostitutes talaga. Na ginagawang living talaga yung pagiging prostitute. Tapos nakakatulong din naman sila sa bansa dahil yun nga, nag-increase yung tourism since dahil yung mga reason ng mga nagpupunta doon is to have sex with teenage girls. These teenage girls, hindi naman sila napilitan kasi ginagawa lang nila to for themselves. And so yun, sa ibang opportunity, hindi naman konti lang din yung opportunity sa ibang job. Kasi hindi nga sila, yung most of them, hindi sila educated. Kaya may maliit yung opportunity nila sa ibang jobs. Kaya in 2003, it was reported that prostitution was a $4.3 billion industries in Thailand, accounting for an estimated 3% of the country's income. So, ang laking bagay na natulong ng prostitution sa bansa mismo. Dahil yun nga, hindi naman, kaysa naman wala silang gawin, kumbaga tumulong na lang sila sa bansa niya. So in 1990, approximately 8,652,000 tourists visited Thailand, and by 2002, that number rose to about 10,870,000. Out of all tourists that visit Thailand each year, approximately 60% are male, and NGOs estimate that 70% of male tourists in Thailand are sex tourists. That means that in 2002, about 4,560,000 male tourists came to Thailand specifically for sex. $4 billion per year tourist industry is the linchpin of the modernization process called the Thai economic miracle. And the linchpin of that industry is sex. The author argued that Thailand's economic boom was a result of national and international development policies which deliberately impoverished 252 rural areas of Thailand to provide more female sex workers and thus fuel the sex industry. So sinasabi na yung Thailand mismo ay nag-encourage sa mga babaeng tao nila na i-pursue yung sex industry, yung pagiging prostitute. Kasi ang laking tulong ng bigay nito sa bansa. So sex tourism compromises a significant portion of tourism in Thailand. The Bangkok Post reported that approximately 60% of Thailand's national income comes from tourism, mainly sex tourism.
So I am from the opposition whip, and our side concluded that prostitution is immoral. Why? Because there are three types of prostitutes. First, those who did not freely decide to become prostitutes. Second, those who are driven to the profession by desperation and a lack of other opportunities for employment. And third, some of them are freely chose to be prostitutes. So doon pa lang makikita na natin na nag-fail yung coercion ng argument. There are certain types of prostitution na sinasabi, ang prostitution are just moral as most other jobs. Why? Wherein lahat tayo nagtatrabaho for money. And pag sinabi nilang yung prostitutes daw ay nagtatrabaho for money, immoral na daw yun. So, meaning tayo din, immoral din. Yung mga halimbawa, yung mga tao nagtatrabaho sa mga factory, sinusugal nila yung katawan nila for money para lang masweldohan sila. So, meaning immoral na sila. Tapos, eto pa. We think that freely chosen prostitution would be morally acceptable as long as they voluntarily engage in that kind of job. Siyempre, ginusto nila yon. Para sa kanila yun yung mas madaling gawin kaysa magtrabaho sa ibang na hindi naman sila matanggap-tanggap. For example, noong 1990s, bumagsak yung economy ng Thailand, so promote nila yung tourism. Pero, nalaman nila na yung 3% ng income ng Thailand is galing sa sex tourism. Therefore, na-conclude namin na yung sex tourism is amoral dahil pwede siya in a way na pag pumayag naman yung dalawang taong mag-sex, pero may kapalit na money, and bawal siya dahil nga illegal siya, pero ginagawa pa rin para lang sa masustain yung pangangailangan ng mga tao.